I am Clara, 33 years old, and my husband just sent me a text message that shattered our 12-year marriage into a million irreparable pieces. I asked him what time I should get ready for his sister Olivia's wedding rehearsal. His reply was exactly 12 words. My mother does not want you there. You are an embarrassment to us. He had no idea that just 4 days earlier I had secretly wired $9 million in cash to purchase the exact oceanfront estate his mother was currently parading around in. I did not cry or scream. I simply typed one word, understood. Then I opened my laptop and prepared to burn his fake empire to the ground. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to a toxic family member who underestimated your worth. I stared at the glowing screen of my phone as Harrison's message burned into my vision. 12 years. I had spent 12 years of my life shrinking myself, wearing sensible, inexpensive clothes, and playing the role of the quiet, dowdy wife, just so Harrison could shine as the brilliant wealth manager of the family. He loved the narrative. He wore $5,000 bespoke suits, drove a leased sports car, and spent our family dinners boasting about his high-net-worth clients. His mother Beatrice ate it up. Beatrice was a 62-year-old suburban manipulator who was absolutely obsessed with status, old money, and climbing the social ladder. To her, I was just Clara, the socially awkward help desk worker her handsome son had taken pity on. The truth was something Harrison never bothered to actually understand because he always dismissed my career as boring computer stuff. I did not work at an IT help desk. I was the founder and sole chief executive officer of a business-to-business cybersecurity software firm. 18 months ago, I quietly sold my company to a massive tech conglomerate. That acquisition made me liquid to the tune of 9 figures. But Harrison never knew. He never asked. I kept my wealth entirely shielded behind ironclad non-disclosure agreements and corporate privacy laws, preferring a quiet, normal life over flashy displays of money. I padded our joint checking accounts anonymously so Harrison could feel like a top-tier provider, letting him believe his mid-level finance job was funding his extravagant lifestyle. Just 2 weeks ago, Harrison had come to me literally in tears, dropping to his knees in our living room. He confessed that Beatrice was facing imminent bankruptcy and foreclosure on her house because she had over-leveraged every asset to keep up appearances for her country club friends. He begged me to dip into my modest savings to help him secure a loan for a small condo for her. My heart had ached for him. I wanted to give my husband the ultimate victory, a genuine gesture of family support without emasculating him with my wealth. So I used my private ghost company Apex Holdings to purchase a breathtaking $9 million oceanfront estate in Newport, Rhode Island, in cold hard cash. I structured the paperwork to let Harrison take the credit. I let him tell Beatrice that he had masterminded a brilliant complex investment deal to secure this ultimate dream home for her. I gave him the ultimate bragging right. And how did they repay me? By deciding I was too much of a peasant to be seen in the background of his sister's wedding photos. They wanted to hide me from Olivia's new in-laws because I did not fit their fabricated high society aesthetic. I sat down at my desk, the silence of my home office ringing in my ears. I bypassed the standard login screens on my computer and routed my connection through a secure virtual private network, bringing up the master dashboard for Apex Holdings. On paper, Apex Holdings was a faceless real estate management firm. In reality, it was my personal vault, owned 100% by me. I clicked on the Property Management tab for the Newport estate. The digital deed loaded onto the screen, crisp and undeniable. Sole owner Apex Holdings. Beatrice was listed merely as a temporary at-will tenant. Her occupancy was granted strictly at the discretion of the company's executive board, which consisted entirely of me. My phone vibrated against the mahogany desk. Another text from Harrison lit up the screen. It is nothing personal, Clara. You just do not know how to act around people like Jamal's family. They are old money from Atlanta, very prestigious. Mom just wants Olivia's day to be perfect. Order some nice takeout on my card tonight, okay? I read the text twice, letting the sheer unfiltered audacity of his words sink deep into my skin. order takeout on his card. The exact same credit card that had declined at a gas station 3 weeks ago because he had maxed out his credit limit buying a vintage Rolex watch just to impress Beatrice. He was telling me to buy a cheap dinner with money he did not even possess while parading around a $9 million mansion I had bought for them. I did not reply to his message. I picked up my phone and dialed my attorney Mitchell. The phone rang twice before his deep, authoritative voice answered. Mitchell, I said, my tone completely devoid of the emotion that had been suffocating me just minutes prior. Clara, he replied. It is late. Do not tell me the European servers are acting up again. No, I said, my eyes fixed firmly on the digital deed to the Newport mansion on my monitor. I need you to pull up the tenancy agreement for the Rhode Island property, the one currently occupied by Beatrice. I heard the rapid clicking of a keyboard on the other end of the line. Mitchell was a brilliant 55-year-old legal shark who had engineered the sale of my software company. He knew every financial move I made, and he had explicitly warned me against buying the house for Beatrice. I have it, Mitchell said, his voice dropping an octave as he sensed the dangerous shift in my demeanor. What do you need me to do? Check the revocation clause, I instructed, my voice as cold and precise as a scalpel. How fast can we legally terminate her occupancy? It is an at-will tenancy granted by a corporate entity to a non-paying occupant, Mitchell stated smoothly. Under Rhode Island law, with the specific waivers we had Harrison sign on her behalf, I can have a notice of immediate eviction drafted, stamped, and ready for a sheriff to serve in less than 48 hours if we cite a breach of corporate terms. Why? What did they do? They told me I was an embarrassment, I said softly, the corner of my mouth finally lifting into a cold smile. So I am going to show them exactly how embarrassing I can be. I will have the paperwork on your desk by tomorrow morning, Mitchell replied, a hint of dark amusement coloring his tone. Shall I freeze the secondary accounts while I'm at it? Not yet, I said. Let them dig the hole a little deeper. Just prep the eviction. I hung up the phone and leaned back in my chair. The wedding was in exactly 5 days. 5 days for Beatrice to parade around the $9 million mansion she thought her son bought her. 5 days for Harrison to play the billionaire wealth manager. They thought they had cleanly excised the family embarrassment from their picture-perfect weekend. They did not realize they had just declared war on the landlord. The next morning, the house was suffocatingly quiet. Harrison had already left for the office by the time I walked down to the kitchen. He had left a sticky note on the espresso machine. Have a good day at work. Left a $100 bill on the counter for you to get a massage or something. Love you. I stared at the crisp bill resting next to the sugar bowl. It was a pathetic, transparent bribe. A cheap consolation prize for being erased from my own family's most important social event. I did not touch the money. Instead, I poured myself a cup of black coffee and leaned against the granite counter, letting the reality of my husband's deception wash over me. I needed to remind myself exactly why I was doing this, to ensure that any lingering trace of sentimentality was thoroughly eradicated. Harrison's entire professional identity was a meticulously crafted illusion. He loved to parade around town introducing himself as a top-tier wealth manager, but the reality was laughably grim. Harrison worked at a mid-tier financial firm where he barely managed to meet his quarterly quotas. His actual salary was shockingly mediocre, barely enough to cover the lease on his flashy sports car, let alone the lavish lifestyle he flaunted on social media. For years, I had quietly routed my own corporate dividends into our joint checking accounts, masking them as his performance bonuses and end-of-year commissions. I paid for his expensive country club memberships. I funded his bespoke wardrobe. I propped up his fragile ego because I loved him and believed that financial peace would translate into a happy marriage. Instead, my silent generosity turned him into a monster of entitlement. He truly believed he was a financial genius, and his mother Beatrice worshipped the ground he walked on. She weaponized his fabricated success against me at every opportunity. My mind drifted back to the dinner party Beatrice had hosted just 3 weeks ago to celebrate Olivia's engagement to Jamal. Jamal was a 32-year-old cardiovascular surgeon from Atlanta. He was an African-American man hailing from a prominent family of federal judges and specialized physicians representing true multi-generational excellence and real old money. He carried himself with an effortless, grounded dignity that made Harrison's flashy designer suits look like cheap costumes. Beatrice was absolutely terrified of Jamal's prestigious family. She was obsessed with proving that the Blackwells were of equal, if not superior, pedigree. At that engagement dinner, I had worn a simple, elegant navy dress. It was not flashy, but it was a vintage piece I cherished. As soon as I walked through the heavy oak doors of Beatrice's old suburban house, she had pulled me aside, her manicured nails digging into my arm. Clara, really, she had hissed, eyeing my dress with blatant disgust. Jamal's parents are flying in from Atlanta. His father is a federal judge. Could you not have found something that does not look like it came off a clearance rack at a discount store? Try not to talk about your little computer job tonight. We do not want them thinking Harrison married the IT help desk. I had bitten my tongue, choosing peace over conflict, just as I had for 12 years. But the ultimate insult came when it was time to sit for dinner. I found my place card had been deliberately moved to the far end of the long dining table, wedged between Olivia's teenage cousins. I was literally placed at the kids' table. I looked over at Harrison, fully expecting him to intervene to demand his wife sit beside him where she belonged. Instead, he just shrugged, offering an apologetic half-smile before turning his attention back to his wine glass, far too eager to impress his future in-laws to stand up for his wife. But Jamal had noticed. Jamal was far too sharp to miss the toxic dynamics radiating through the dining room. Before the first course was even served, he politely excused himself from his seat of honor next to Beatrice. He walked all the way down the length of the dining table and pulled out the empty chair beside me. I hope you do not mind if I join you down here. Clara? Jamal had said, his voice warm and genuinely respectful. Olivia mentioned you work in tech. I have actually been reading up on data encryption protocols for patient medical records. I would love to hear your professional thoughts on the latest decentralized server architectures. For the next 20 minutes, Jamal and I engaged in a brilliant, in-depth conversation about cybersecurity infrastructure. He was inquisitive, highly intelligent, and most importantly, he treated me as an intellectual equal. But across the room, Beatrice's face was turning a dangerous shade of crimson. She could not stand that the prize guest of the evening was giving his undivided attention to the family scapegoat. She marched down to our end of the table, her fake smile plastered on so tight it looked physically painful. Jamal. Dear Beatrice had interrupted loudly, clapping her hands together. You simply must come back to the head of the table and hear about Harrison's latest triumph. He just closed a massive portfolio deal for a new client in Dubai. Harrison is an absolute genius with wealth management. He basically carries his entire firm on his back. Harrison had puffed out his chest, looking immensely pleased with himself, as Jamal politely excused himself and returned to the front of the room. Sitting in my kitchen now holding my coffee mug, the memory made my blood boil hot enough to scald. Harrison was not managing portfolios in Dubai. He was managing to barely keep his job, heavily relying on my discreet, anonymous cash infusions just to survive. My phone chimed sharply on the granite counter, pulling me out of the memory and back to the present. It was an automated alert from my secondary banking application. Transaction alert. $40,000 charged to Platinum Visa, ending in 4492 at Le Rêve Bridal Boutique. I blinked, setting my coffee mug down hard. The Platinum Visa was a card I had given Harrison 2 years ago, strictly for household emergencies. It was tied directly to a private trust account that I managed personally. Over the years, Harrison had conveniently forgotten it was my money, treating it as a limitless slush fund. I quickly opened my laptop and logged into the bank's secure portal. I pulled up the live transaction feed. Olivia and Beatrice were currently at an exclusive bridal boutique downtown. Olivia was attempting to buy a $40,000 wedding gown using my money. The money of the exact same woman they had just deemed too socially unfit to attend the wedding. I did not hesitate. I did not call Harrison to ask for an explanation. I did not call Beatrice to argue or beg for basic respect. I simply clicked the bright red button on the banking dashboard marked Report Card as stolen and freeze account. I watched the screen intently. 60 seconds later, the transaction was flagged by the system. A new notification popped up in bright red letters. Status declined. Account frozen. I closed the laptop with a deeply satisfying click. Let them try to explain that to the bridal boutique manager. Less than 5 minutes later, my phone began to ring. It was Harrison. I let it ring out. He called again. I sent it straight to voicemail. A moment later, a frantic text message came through, lighting up my phone screen. Clara, answer the phone right now. Did you do something to the emergency card? Mom and Olivia are at the bridal boutique, and the card was declined in front of the entire staff. The manager threatened to call the police because the system flagged it as stolen. Fix this right now. I took a slow sip of my coffee, savoring the bitter, rich taste. I typed my response with deliberate slowness, making sure every word dripped with polite detachment. Oh no, that is terrible. I noticed a suspicious $40,000 charge for a wedding dress and assumed the card was stolen, since I obviously would not be buying a dress for a wedding I am not invited to. The bank locked the account for fraud. It takes 5 to 7 business days to unfreeze. Tell Olivia good luck with the dress I am ordering takeout tonight. I tossed the phone onto the kitchen island and walked away. The image of Beatrice and Olivia standing humiliated in a high-end bridal boutique brought a deep sense of satisfaction. But the satisfaction was quickly replaced by the sharp, stinging memory of the engagement dinner 3 weeks ago. That night was the true catalyst for my vengeance the moment I realized just how deep their disdain for me ran. The flashback hit me with vivid clarity. We had arrived at Beatrice's suburban home, and the air was thick with the smell of expensive catered food and desperation. Jamal's family had flown in from Atlanta, and Beatrice was pacing the foyer like a frantic general preparing for war. Jamal was a brilliant cardiovascular surgeon, and his African-American family represented generations of academic and professional excellence. His father was a federal judge, his mother a highly respected university dean. They were true old money, possessing a quiet, grounded dignity that Beatrice desperately wanted to emulate, but could only awkwardly mimic. The moment I stepped through the front door wearing my understated navy dress, Beatrice had intercepted me. She grabbed my arm, her manicured nails digging painfully into my skin, and dragged me into the dimly lit hallway adjacent to the kitchen, far away from the arriving guests. Clara, what on earth are you wearing? Beatrice had hissed, her eyes scanning my outfit with undisguised revulsion. You look like you just finished a shift at a discount department store. I told Harrison to make sure you dressed appropriately for tonight. I am wearing a classic vintage piece. Beatrice, I had replied calmly, pulling my arm out of her tight grip. It is perfectly appropriate for an engagement dinner. Appropriate for your standard, maybe? She snapped, her voice trembling with anxiety and malice. But Jamal's parents are here. Do you understand who they are? They are elite. They are distinguished. We need to present a united, flawless front. And you are a liability. I will not have you wandering around talking about your little computer job. I work in cybersecurity, Beatrice. I own my company. I corrected her, though I had never disclosed the true scale or the 9-figure sale of my business. It is an IT help desk job, Clara. Do not dress it up, she scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. You fix computers. Jamal's mother is a dean. His father is a federal judge. We do not want them thinking Harrison married the hired help. Harrison is on the verge of making senior partner at his wealth management firm, and his image is everything right now. You are an embarrassment to his success. I had stood there in the hallway absorbing the venom of her words. For 12 years I had paid her mortgage, funded her son's fake lifestyle, and smiled through her insults. Before I could respond, Harrison had walked into the hallway. Mom, they are pouring the champagne, Harrison had said, completely ignoring the tension radiating between us. Harrison. Thank goodness, Beatrice said instantly, transforming her tone into one of maternal distress. I was just explaining to Clara that given the seating arrangements, it would be best if she sat at the smaller table near the patio doors. We need the main dining table for Jamal's immediate family and the principal investors from your firm. The smaller table near the patio doors was the kids' table occupied by Olivia's rowdy teenage cousins. Beatrice was literally banishing me from the main event to hide me from her future in-laws. I looked at Harrison expecting him to object to defend his wife of 12 years. Instead, he refused to meet my eyes. He adjusted his $5,000 silk tie, a tie paid for by my corporate dividends, and gave a helpless shrug. "It makes sense," Clara Harrison had muttered, looking at the floor. "The main table is going to be mostly business talk anyway. Jamal's dad wants to discuss investment portfolios. You would probably just be bored. Plus, we really need to impress them. Just do this for Olivia, okay?" He had sold me out for the illusion of status. He had agreed to hide his wife because he was ashamed of the very woman who was quietly funding his entire existence. "Fine," I had said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I will sit wherever you like." "Oh, and Clara." Beatrice had added, her eyes flashing with malicious triumph. "Try not to speak to Jamal's parents unless spoken to. We do not need you confusing them with your awkward social skills. Just smile and eat your dinner." I had walked away from them and taken my seat at the kids' table. I had watched from the margins as Beatrice fawned over Jamal's family, loudly boasting about Harrison's non-existent offshore accounts and fabricated real estate empires. I had watched Harrison nod along, drinking expensive wine and playing the role of the self-made billionaire. They thought they had won. They thought they had successfully swept the embarrassing IT worker under the rug. But sitting in my kitchen now staring at my frozen bank application, I knew the truth. Beatrice's insults were not a sign of superiority. They were the desperate thrashings of a woman drowning in debt, clinging to a life raft that I had built. And now I was going to sink that life raft. The wedding was fast approaching, but Harrison's fake wealth management persona was about to be obliterated. I had locked the credit cards, but that was just a warning shot. It was time to dive into the financial records he thought he had hidden from me. It was time to find out exactly where my money had been going. I opened a new secure terminal on my multi-monitor setup. The digital trail left by a man trying to hide his financial life is incredibly predictable. Harrison thought changing his banking passwords and routing his emails to a private server made him a ghost. He forgot that he was married to a woman who literally built the encryption architecture his financial firm relied on for their daily operations. It took me less than 45 minutes to bypass Harrison's flimsy security measures and gain full access to his personal unshared accounts. What I found was a masterpiece of financial deception. Harrison was not just inflating his success to his mother. He was actively embezzling money from our joint checking and savings accounts. Over the past 3 years, he had systematically siphoned off nearly $400,000 in small, untraceable increments, funneling the money into an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. My heart hammered against my ribs as I traced the routing numbers. He was draining my resources to build a secret escape hatch. As I sat there absorbing the sheer scale of his betrayal, a jarring, high-pitched alarm blared from my phone. This was not a standard text message or a low-balance notification. It was a Tier 1 security breach alert from the private banking division that managed the corporate assets for Apex Holdings. I grabbed the phone, my eyes scanning the emergency notification. An authorization request was pending. $40,000 at Le Rêve Bridal Boutique. I blinked in pure disbelief. The first credit card I had frozen earlier was a standard platinum Visa. The card currently being swiped at the boutique was my solid titanium corporate black card. It was a card tied directly to my hidden corporate assets, a card I kept locked in a biometric safe hidden behind a framed painting in my office. I spun around in my chair. The painting was slightly askew. Harrison must have watched me open it from the hallway weeks ago, memorized my keypad sequence, and bypassed the secondary scanner using the manual override code. In a desperate panic to save face after the first card was declined, he had rushed back to the house, broken into my safe, and stolen my corporate card. He likely assumed it was just another perk of my tech job, completely unaware that it was tied to a 9-figure corporate vault. I turned back to my monitors. The banking dashboard showed the massive transaction hanging in the verification queue. The boutique manager was currently running the card, waiting for the system to approve the charge. I could picture the scene perfectly. Olivia standing on a pedestal in her extravagant white gown, Beatrice sipping complimentary champagne, and Harrison confidently handing over the heavy titanium card, assuring everyone that his limitless wealth would quickly resolve the earlier banking error. I did not simply click the decline button this time. I engaged the active fraud lockdown protocol. This specific security measure triggered an immediate automated phone call from the bank's fraud department directly to the merchant's point-of-sale terminal. Using my network access, I seamlessly tapped into the audio feed of the call. I could hear the faint echoing sounds of the bridal shop through the digital relay. The boutique manager's voice was polite, but audibly strained. "Sir, I am incredibly sorry, but this card is also generating a severe restriction code. The system is locking my terminal." Harrison's voice came through the audio feed, loud, arrogant, and dripping with condescension. "That is absolutely impossible. Run it again. It is a corporate black card. There is no limit on that account." "Do you have any idea who I am? I manage portfolios worth more than this entire block." I smiled, a cold, ruthless expression spreading across my face. I unmuted my microphone, routing my voice directly into the bank's automated merchant line so I would be heard through the speakerphone on the boutique's counter. "Excuse me," I said, my voice cutting through the tense atmosphere of the bridal shop with absolute authority. "This is the primary cardholder and chief executive officer of Apex Holdings. The man standing in front of you is attempting to use a stolen corporate asset to purchase a wedding dress." The audio feed captured the absolute chaos that followed. Beatrice gasped so loudly it sounded like she was choking. Olivia demanded to know what was happening, her voice shrill and panicked. Harrison stammered, his confident, wealthy facade instantly crumbling into dust. "Clara," he whispered, pure terror lacing his voice. "How are you on this line? What are you doing?" I ignored him entirely and continued speaking directly to the boutique manager. "Please confiscate that titanium card immediately. If Mr. Blackwell and his family do not leave your premises in the next 60 seconds, you have my full legal authorization to contact the police and press charges for felony credit card theft." I did not wait for a response. I severed the connection, plunging my home office back into silence. The silence felt different now. It was charged with electric victory. Harrison had finally crossed a line he could never uncross. He had not just lied to me or insulted me at a dinner party. He had committed a federal crime by stealing a corporate card tied to my hidden assets. I turned my attention back to the offshore banking records glowing on my multi-monitor setup. The stolen card was just the beginning of his mistakes. I dug deeper into his highest expenditures, filtering the data by location and amount. I found monthly payments of $4,500 to a luxury apartment complex downtown, a building we had absolutely no investments in. I found constant charges at high-end jewelers and exclusive restaurants. But the most glaring anomaly was a massive wire transfer of $85,000 sent just 2 months ago to a luxury car dealership. The memo line attached to the transfer read, "Happy birthday, baby." I ran a quick search on the dealership's public sales records, cross-referencing the exact date of the transfer. They had posted a celebratory photo on their social media page. I pulled the image up on my screen and felt the remaining breath leave my lungs. There, standing next to a brand-new cherry-red sports car, was Harrison. But he was not alone. Wrapped around his arm, wearing a tennis skirt and a smile that radiated pure entitlement, was a blonde woman who looked barely 24 years old. My husband was actively planning a future with a mistress. He was parading her around town, spending my hard-earned money while telling me to order takeout because I was too embarrassing to be seen with his family. The pain was sharp, but it was instantly swallowed by a cold, calculating rage. I picked up my phone and dialed my attorney. The wedding rehearsal was only days away, and I was going to ensure Harrison lost absolutely everything. Mitchell answered on the first ring, his voice crisp despite the late hour. I did not waste time. I told him everything that had just transpired at the bridal boutique, detailing how Harrison bypassed the biometric safe to steal the corporate titanium card. Mitchell let out a low growl. "Clara, that is a felony." By crossing into Apex Holdings assets, he committed severe corporate fraud. I can have him arrested tomorrow. No, I replied, staring at the monitors displaying Harrison's financial crimes. An arrest today is far too quiet. He would just spin a story to his mother. I want a public execution of his character. I want his fabricated life ripped away in front of the high society audience he destroyed our marriage to impress. Mitchell tapped his pen against his desk. What is your directive, Clara? I am sending you a secure data file now, I said, typing rapidly. It contains routing numbers for an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Harrison has been embezzling from our joint accounts for 3 years. Initiate a full forensic audit. Look into the luxury apartment lease and the Porsche financing. Leave no stone unturned. Consider it done, Mitchell said. I will pull my best accountants tonight. What are you going to do in the meantime? I am going to dig into his professional life, I said. I built the encryption architecture for his wealth management firm. I know how to get in without tripping their alarms. Be careful, Clara Mitchell warned. Crossing into his firm's servers is highly illegal. They use my proprietary software. I left a back door for emergency maintenance. I am simply performing a routine system check. I will speak to you tomorrow. I ended the phone call and leaned forward. Harrison had always boasted about his high net worth clients and the massive portfolios he managed. I opened a new terminal and executed the backdoor command sequence I had written 5 years ago. The firm's firewall parted like water, granting me absolute administrative access to their central client database. I ran a query for Harrison Blackwell. The system pulled up his internal employment file and active client roster. I scanned the data, my eyes narrowing as the ugly truth materialized. Harrison was not a top-tier wealth manager. He was the absolute lowest-performing broker in his division. He had been placed on probation twice for failing to meet basic quarterly quotas. But what truly made my blood run cold was his client list. He only had 4 active accounts. I clicked on the largest portfolio listed under Horizon Ventures, boasting a balance of $2 million. It was the exact account Harrison constantly referenced, the one he claimed funded his lavish commission checks. I traced the origin of the funds within Horizon Ventures. The money did not come from an external investor. The deposits aligned perfectly with the exact dates and amounts of the anonymous cash infusions I had been making into our joint checking account. Harrison had taken the money I gave him, laundered it through shell corporations, and deposited it back into his own firm under a fake corporate name. He was acting as his own client. He was generating fake commission checks by moving my money in a circle. His entire career was a manufactured illusion funded entirely by my charity. He was a parasite feeding on its host, wearing a flashy designer suit to hide his professional bankruptcy. I sat back in my chair, the magnitude of his delusion washing over me. He had convinced himself he was a financial genius by playing a 3-card monte with his wife's money, and he had the audacity to call me an embarrassment. My phone buzzed loudly. It was a text message from Beatrice. Clara, I do not know what banking error you caused, but Harrison is furious. You humiliated us in front of the boutique staff. Jamal's family is expecting a flawless weekend, and your petty games are ruining Olivia's joy. Harrison said he will handle the dress payment through one of his offshore client accounts, but you need to apologize to him immediately. You are incredibly lucky he is successful enough to fix your mistakes. I read the message 3 times. Beatrice truly believed I was the incompetent one getting in the way of their grand high society dreams. She thought her son was a savior. I typed my reply with surgical precision. I am so sorry for the confusion, Beatrice. Harrison's success is truly something to behold. I will make sure everything is perfectly clear by the rehearsal dinner. I promise it will be a night none of you will ever forget. I hit send and tossed the phone aside. The pieces of the puzzle were locking together. Harrison had stolen a corporate card. He had committed wire fraud by moving embezzled funds offshore. He was defrauding his firm by operating shell accounts, and he was funding a secret life with a mistress using my own money. I reached into my desk and pulled out a leather folder. I started printing every piece of evidence. Bank statements, wire transfer logs, IP routing data, and the photograph of the mistress. I organized them methodically, sliding each page into a clear sleeve. This was no longer just a divorce filing, it was a federal indictment. I was not just going to take the mansion away from Beatrice or stop paying for Olivia's wedding. I was going to hand the authorities a perfectly wrapped package containing every single financial crime Harrison had committed. I looked up at the clock. It was past midnight. The rehearsal dinner was 48 hours away. I closed the leather folder, the snap of the clasp echoing in the quiet room. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was dress the part, walk into that $9 million mansion, and watch the rats turn on each other when the ship finally began to sink. But sleep did not come that night. The adrenaline coursing through my veins made resting impossible. I poured another cup of black coffee and stared at the printed photo of Harrison and the blonde girl at the luxury car dealership. I had found the photo earlier, but the sheer volume of his financial crimes had distracted me from the deeply personal betrayal staring me right in the face. I needed to know exactly how he funded that cherry red sports car. The offshore accounts were built slowly over 3 years, but the car dealership required an immediate lump sum wire transfer of $85,000. That money did not come from his shell companies, it came from somewhere else. I logged back into my secure banking portal this time, bypassing the joint checking and corporate assets entirely. I navigated directly to a private high-yield retirement account I had established during the early days of my tech startup. It was an account I rarely monitored, designed to sit untouched for decades. My stomach dropped as the dashboard loaded on the screen. A massive withdrawal had been executed 2 months ago. Exactly $85,000 pulled out with a severe early withdrawal penalty attached. I pulled the digital authorization forms from the bank archive. There, at the bottom of the document, was my own signature. It was flawlessly forged. Harrison had not just stolen my corporate credit card. He had committed identity theft to raid my retirement fund, the very safety net I had built through years of grueling 80-hour work weeks, all to buy a luxury vehicle for a woman 10 years younger than me. I looked back at the printed photograph of the girl. Her name was Chloe. I needed to know everything about her. I ran her image through a facial recognition database used by my former cybersecurity firm. Within seconds, I had her full name, her home address, and links to every public profile she maintained online. Chloe was 24 years old. She worked part-time at a high-end fitness studio downtown, and her entire extravagant lifestyle was being funded directly by my stolen retirement savings. I scrolled slowly through her social media feed. It was a digital shrine to her relationship with my husband. There were photos of them dining at exclusive steakhouses, vacationing in tropical resorts, and lounging on the balcony of the $4,500 a month apartment he was renting for her. But as I clicked deeper into her profile, a sickening realization washed over me. I stopped on a group photo taken 6 months ago at a trendy brunch spot. Harrison was sitting next to Chloe, his arm wrapped tightly around her waist. And sitting directly across the table from them, laughing and raising a glass to the camera, was Olivia. My breath caught in my throat. I clicked on another photo. This one showed Chloe and Beatrice shopping together at a luxury boutique holding up matching designer handbags. The caption read, "Best afternoon with my future mother-in-law." The room started to spin. I pushed my heavy chair back from the desk and sank to the hardwood floor, my knees pulling up tightly to my chest. They all knew. For months, Harrison had been parading his young mistress around with his mother and his sister. They had welcomed this 24-year-old girl into the family with wide-open arms. They had gone on vacations with her. They had taken her shopping using the very credit cards I was paying off every month. They had sat across from me at family dinners, smiling and asking me to pass the wine, while fully aware that Harrison was using my retirement funds to build a brand new life with someone else. That was why I was uninvited from the wedding. It had nothing to do with me being an embarrassment or not fitting in with Jamal's prestigious family. Olivia wanted Chloe at the wedding. They were actively replacing me, systematically erasing 12 years of loyalty, sacrifice, and love, all while continuing to drain my bank accounts to fund the transition. The physical pain in my chest was agonizing. It felt as though someone had reached between my ribs and crushed my heart. I had loved Harrison. I had defended him. I had bought a $9 million mansion to save his mother from homelessness. And they had repaid me by laughing behind my back with a girl who was still in college when Harrison and I stood at the altar and promised forever. For the first time since receiving the text message that started this nightmare, I cried. I sat on the floor of my home office and let the heavy, choking sobs tear out of my throat. I grieved for the 12 years I had wasted. I grieved for the woman I had forced myself to become to protect a man who was actively destroying me. But the tears did not last long. The shattering grief began to harden. The sadness crystallized into something cold, sharp, and unbreakable. I wiped my face with the back of my hand and stood up slowly. I looked at the glowing monitors displaying the forged signatures, the stolen funds, and the smiling faces of the people who thought they could discard me like trash. They assumed my silence was weakness. They assumed my quiet demeanor meant I was defenseless. They did not understand that a woman who builds an empire in the shadows knows exactly how to tear one down in the dark. The agonizing, suffocating pain was now entirely gone, permanently replaced by a cold, calculated, and absolute vengeance that would completely destroy every single lie they had ever built. The following morning brought a brilliant sky over the coast, a stark contrast to the dark storm brewing in my mind. Beatrice was scheduled to host her exclusive bridal tea party at the Newport Mansion at 1 o'clock. It was designed specifically to welcome Jamal's mother, Dr. Evelyn Hayes, along with his aunts who had flown in from Atlanta. Beatrice had been bragging about this exact event for weeks, hyping up her new oceanfront estate to prove to Jamal's prestigious family that the Blackwells were old money royalty. Naturally, I was not invited. The guest list was tightly controlled to ensure the family embarrassment remained hidden. But I did not need an invitation to enter my own property. I arrived at the estate at precisely 1:15. I bypassed the massive grand iron gates by rolling down my window and punching the master access code into the keypad. The heavy gates swung open smoothly. I parked slightly off the main circular driveway, keeping my vehicle hidden behind a towering row of manicured hydrangeas. I did not dress up for a tea party. I wore sharply tailored dark slacks, a simple black turtleneck, and a structured blazer. I carried a sleek titanium clipboard filled with official-looking property management forms. I looked exactly like what I was pretending to be, a high-end corporate security inspector representing a real estate conglomerate. I walked up the stone steps and through the mahogany front doors. The mansion was flooded with natural light from the floor-to-ceiling windows. In the grand parlor, I could hear the delicate clinking of fine china and polite conversation. A classical string duo played softly in the corner. It was a picture of fabricated perfection, funded entirely by my charity and Harrison's theft. I walked directly toward the parlor. Beatrice was holding court, gesturing grandly to the vaulted ceilings. "Yes," Harrison insisted. "I have a place with a view," Beatrice was saying to a stunning African-American woman sitting across from her. I recognized Jamal's mother, Dr. Evelyn Hayes. He is such a successful wealth manager. He handles high-value portfolios effortlessly, but family is his top priority. He bought this estate so Olivia could have the perfect backdrop for her wedding preparations. Dr. Hayes smiled politely, taking a sip from her teacup. Her eyes held a discerning intelligence that suggested she was not buying the performance. Jamal's family possessed genuine generational wealth. Beatrice's desperate overcompensation was painfully obvious. As I stepped into the room, my shoes clicking against the imported marble floor, the atmosphere shifted. Olivia spotted me first. The color drained from her heavily contoured face. She practically dropped her teacup, rushing over to intercept me before I could reach the VIP guests. "What are you doing here?" Olivia hissed, grabbing my elbow and trying to yank me back toward the hallway. "Are you insane? You were explicitly told not to come. Mom is going to have a literal heart attack." I easily twisted my arm out of her grip, smoothing my blazer with deliberate precision. "Relax, Olivia. I am not here for tea. I am here in a professional capacity." I tapped the clipboard. I need to inspect the central security node for the property management firm. It is a mandatory protocol for estates of this value. The commotion caught Beatrice's attention. Excusing herself from Dr. Hayes with a strained smile, she marched over. Her face was twisted into a mask of suppressed, boiling fury. "Clara," Beatrice whispered, her voice trembling with rage. "How dare you show your face in this house? Do not embarrass us in front of Jamal's family. Go out the back door right now before I have the caterers physically remove you." I looked down at my mother-in-law. For 12 years, this woman had made me feel like dirt beneath her designer shoes. She had conspired to replace me with a 24-year-old girl. Now standing in a $9 million home that I legally owned, her empty threats sounded pathetic. "I am doing a mandated inspection, Beatrice," I said, my voice carrying just enough volume to ensure Dr. Hayes could hear the icy calm in my tone. "I need to make sure the property is secure. The actual owners of this estate are very particular about who has access to the premises." Beatrice's eyes darted nervously toward Dr. Hayes. "Harrison is the owner, you idiot," she hissed under her breath. "Now leave before I call the police. Is everything all right over here?" We all turned. Jamal had just walked into the parlor, arriving from the airport earlier than expected. His eyes locked onto me, sensing the thick hostility radiating from Beatrice and Olivia. "Clara," Jamal said, stepping past the two furious women and offering a warm smile. "It is wonderful to see you. I wanted to ask you more about that decentralized server architecture we discussed." Olivia quickly stepped between us, pasting on a manic smile. "Oh, Jamal, Clara was just leaving. She has an emergency IT issue to attend to. You know how demanding her tech job is." Jamal frowned, looking from Olivia's panicked face to my calm demeanor. He could feel the toxic energy suffocating the room. "Leaving already? Will we see you at the rehearsal dinner tomorrow night, Clara?" Beatrice glared at me with pleading eyes, silently demanding I play along with whatever lie Harrison had spun. I looked Jamal directly in the eyes. I liked him immensely. He deserved to know the truth before he tied himself to this sinking ship. "I would not miss the rehearsal dinner for the world, Jamal," I said smoothly. "In fact, I have a very special presentation planned for the family tomorrow evening. It is going to be incredibly illuminating." I turned my attention back to Beatrice, leaning in close. "Enjoy the tea party, Beatrice. I truly hope you appreciate the ocean view while it lasts. Time is ticking." I turned on my heel and walked out the front doors. Behind me, I could hear Beatrice frantically trying to redirect Jamal's attention. As I got into my car and drove away, my phone buzzed. It was a text message from Jamal. "Clara, is everything okay? Olivia is acting strange and Harrison told me you were away on an urgent trip. Something feels very off here." I smiled, merging onto the coastal highway. I typed a quick reply. "Just pay very close attention tomorrow night, Jamal. And whatever you do, do not sign any joint financial documents with Olivia until after the rehearsal dinner concludes. Trust me." I placed the phone on the passenger seat and shifted the car into drive. But before I could accelerate down the long coastal driveway, the massive iron gates at the front of the property abruptly halted. They froze halfway open, the red security lights flashing above the stone pillars. Someone had triggered the manual override from the main house. I checked my rearview mirror and saw exactly who had stopped my exit. Beatrice was marching aggressively down the front steps, having completely abandoned her high society tea party. Her face was flushed, a dangerous shade of crimson. She strode down the gravel path, waving her arm frantically for me to stop. I put the vehicle back in park, rolled down my tinted window, and waited with absolute calm. Beatrice reached in, gripped the interior handle, and yanked the heavy door open. "Step out of the car right now," she hissed, her voice vibrating with frantic hysteria. "Step out and walk with me into the side garden before Jamal or his mother see you lingering in the driveway like a stalker. You have done enough damage for one afternoon." I stepped out of the vehicle smoothly. I allowed her to lead me toward the tall manicured hedges that shielded the service entrance from the main courtyard. This was the backdoor pathway, the hidden route designed exclusively for the hired help. It was highly symbolic. She wanted to shove me into the shadows, out of sight from the elite world she so desperately wanted to inhabit. We reached the stone patio near the service door, entirely hidden from the grand parlor windows. Beatrice rounded on me, pointing a shaking finger directly at my face. "You listen to me very carefully, Clara." She spat her eyes wide with malice. "I do not know what kind of mental breakdown you are currently suffering from, but you will not ruin my family. You will not ruin Olivia's wedding weekend with your petty jealousy. You are a bitter, ungrateful woman who cannot handle the fact that my son is ascending to heights you could never dream of reaching." I did not flinch. "Is that what you truly believe, Beatrice?" I asked quietly. "You think Harrison is ascending?" "I know he is," she snapped, lifting her chin with aggressive pride. "He bought this magnificent oceanfront estate to ensure our family legacy. He manages millions of dollars for the most elite clients in the country. And you are nothing but an IT worker who embarrasses him at every turn. That is why you were uninvited. We are protecting our image from you." I took a slow, deliberate step forward. The sudden movement made Beatrice stumble back slightly, her confidence faltering under my unblinking gaze. "Let us talk about this magnificent estate, Beatrice," I said, my voice dropping to a low, commanding register. "Have you ever actually seen the physical deed to this house? Have you ever read the legal paperwork you signed when you moved your designer furniture into these rooms?" Harrison handled all of the legalities, she retorted defensively, though a flicker of doubt flashed in her eyes. "He structured it through a private corporate trust to protect the asset from gold diggers like you." "He told you the house was purchased by a holding company," I stated. "Did he happen to mention the name of that exact company?" "Apex Holdings," Beatrice said smugly. "It is his premier private wealth shell." He explained the financial strategy to me. I could not help but laugh. It was a cold, hollow sound that echoed off the stone walls of the service courtyard. Beatrice flinched as if I had physically struck her. "Harrison does not own Apex Holdings." "Beatrice," I said, pronouncing every single syllable with razor-sharp clarity. "Harrison does not own a premier private wealth shell. He does not even own the leased sports car he drives to work every morning. The quarterly bonuses you brag about to your country club friends are fake. His offshore accounts are funded by money he stole from his own wife. Your son is a fraud." Beatrice turned completely pale. "You are lying," she whispered. "Call him," I challenged softly. "Pull out your phone right now, Beatrice. Call Harrison and ask him to log into the Apex Holdings corporate portal. He will not be able to do it because he does not have the passwords. He is a glorified clerk playing dress-up with my bank accounts." Beatrice swallowed hard, her manicured hands shaking so violently she dropped her expensive clutch purse onto the paving stones. "You are insane," she gasped. "If you lay one finger on this house, I will ruin your miserable little tech career." "You cannot ruin what you do not comprehend," I replied, my tone completely devoid of emotion. "I am not an IT worker fixing routers. 18 months ago, I sold my cybersecurity firm for over $150 million. I am wealthier than Jamal's entire extended family combined. But I never needed to flaunt it because my self-worth is not tied to a borrowed designer label." The silence in the garden was deafening. Beatrice looked at me as if she was seeing a ghost. "And let us talk about Chloe," I said smoothly, dropping the final devastating piece of evidence into the conversation. Beatrice's eyes widened in sheer panic. "Do not say her name," Beatrice hissed. "You went shopping with her last Tuesday," I continued relentlessly. "You smiled and posed for pictures with the girl Harrison is sleeping with. Did you know he used my private retirement funds to buy her that red Porsche? You actively conspired to replace me while continuing to spend the money I was quietly earning." "We just wanted Harrison to be happy," Beatrice cried out, a pathetic, desperate defense slipping from her lips. "You never fit into our world. Chloe understands how to support a successful man. She understands how to spend a successful woman's money," I corrected her sharply. "But that money is entirely gone now. I froze the accounts. I locked the credit cards. I canceled the vendor payments for Olivia's wedding. As of this morning, your family is completely bankrupt." Beatrice physically swayed, clutching the stone wall behind her for support. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. "You wanted me to leave through the back door?" I said, gesturing to the service gate. "But the truth is, Beatrice, you are the one standing on borrowed dirt. You are a temporary non-paying tenant in my house, and your tenancy has officially expired." I turned away from her, walking calmly back to my vehicle. I climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and pressed the remote gate opener I had installed on my own keychain. The iron gates instantly obeyed my command, swinging wide open to the coastal highway. I left Beatrice standing in the shadows, completely paralyzed. The rehearsal dinner was tomorrow night, and her entire world had just been fundamentally destroyed. The drive back to the city was the most peaceful 2 hours I had experienced in a decade. Leaving Beatrice hyperventilating in the garden of her borrowed mansion was a deeply satisfying appetizer, but the main course still required meticulous preparation. Harrison was a cornered animal now. Beatrice would inevitably call him the second she found the breath to speak. She would scream about my threats, my claims of wealth, and my knowledge of Chloe. Harrison would panic. He would realize his offshore embezzlement scheme was exposed. And when a desperate narcissistic man realizes his supply of stolen money is cut off, he always tries to grab the biggest remaining asset he can reach. I needed to ensure there was absolutely nothing left for him to grab. I did not go home. I drove straight to the towering glass skyscraper downtown that housed Mitchell's elite corporate law firm. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the high-altitude conference room was already buzzing with focused activity. Mitchell had assembled a team of his top forensic accountants and 2 senior trust attorneys. They were waiting for me around a massive mahogany table covered in thick legal binders and glowing laptops. "Welcome back," Clara Mitchell said, gesturing to the empty leather chair at the head of the table. "We received the encrypted files you extracted from Harrison's firm last night. The forensic team has already mapped the entire money laundering circuit." I took my seat, smoothing my blazer. "Give me the exact damage report." A sharp senior accountant named Rachel slid a printed flowchart across the table. "Harrison systematically embezzled $420,000 over 36 months, Rachel explained, pointing to the red lines crossing the document. He used a series of domestic shell companies to wash the funds before routing them back into his own wealth management portfolio under a fake client profile named Horizon Ventures. From there, he siphoned the corporate dividends to the Cayman Islands to avoid federal tax flags. He was funding his mistress and his fabricated lifestyle using my money, I stated, feeling the cold anger hum in my chest. "What is his current legal exposure?" "Massive," Mitchell answered bluntly. "He committed federal wire fraud, corporate embezzlement, and severe tax evasion. But more importantly, we found the forged authorization forms for your retirement account. That constitutes felony identity theft. The authorities will have enough evidence to secure a conviction spanning a decade in federal prison." "Good," I said. "But before we hand him over to the FBI, I need to completely shield my legitimate empire from the inevitable blast radius. Harrison is going to try to claim my assets in the divorce settlement, arguing that the wealth was accumulated during the marriage." "That is exactly why we are here today," Mitchell said, opening a thick leather binder. "We are executing a total asset migration. We have established a blind trust in Delaware, operating under strict corporate anonymity laws. Delaware jurisdiction provides an impenetrable shield against spousal claims, especially in cases involving documented financial fraud." For the next 4 hours, I sat in that boardroom and methodically signed away my own name. I transferred the total ownership of my intellectual property, my liquid tech buyout funds, and the entire real estate portfolio of Apex Holdings into the Delaware Trust. Every single dollar I had earned, every patent I had developed, and every property I possessed was legally severed from Clara Blackwell, the wife. It was all securely locked inside an autonomous corporate vault that Harrison could never touch, subpoena, or claim. We moved rapidly, processing the digital transfers through multiple encrypted banking channels. I watched the balances on my personal monitors drop to zero as the funds flooded into the shielded trust. It was a terrifying but incredibly liberating sensation. I was legally stripping myself of all visible wealth, transforming myself back into the modest, unassuming woman Harrison always believed me to be. When I signed the final page of the trust agreement, Mitchell stamped it with his official legal seal. "It is done," Clara Mitchell said, closing the binder. "As of 6:30 this evening, you are officially broke on paper. Your husband cannot touch a single dime. Even if he hires the most aggressive divorce attorney in the state, they will find nothing but empty accounts and a mountain of his own fraudulent debt." I let out a long, slow breath, feeling the crushing weight of the past 12 years finally lift from my shoulders. "Thank you, Mitchell." "There is one more thing," Mitchell added, his expression turning grim. "We intercepted an alert from the county clerk's office an hour ago. Harrison filed an emergency request for a power of attorney document this morning." I froze, my eyes narrowing. "A power of attorney? Why?" "Because he is desperate," Mitchell explained. "His offshore accounts are frozen, his credit cards are locked, and he knows you are investigating his finances. He is likely going to try to trick you into signing over blanket legal authority tonight so he can forcibly liquidate your remaining visible assets before the divorce is filed. He wants to drain you completely dry so he can afford a defense attorney and secure his escape with his mistress." A dangerous smile spread across my face. "He wants me to sign a power of attorney." Mitchell nodded. "Do not sign anything he puts in front of you. It is a trap." "Oh, I am fully aware it is a trap," I replied, grabbing my blazer. "But Harrison has always underestimated my intelligence. He thinks I am a naive, compliant wife who will blindly sign whatever financial document he places on the kitchen counter. If he wants to play legal games, I will gladly participate." I shook Mitchell's hand and walked out of the conference room. The legal shield was officially in place. My empire was safe. Now it was time to go home, look my traitorous husband in the eye, destroy him. I stepped out of the towering glass skyscraper and into the cool evening air, my phone vibrating in my pocket. It was the final automated confirmation from the Delaware State Registry. The blind trust transfer was officially complete. Every single patent I had ever filed, every line of proprietary code I had ever written, and the entire real estate portfolio of Apex Holdings had vanished into an impenetrable legal vault. I was a ghost. On paper, Clara Blackwell was now a woman with zero net worth standing on the sidewalk with nothing but the clothes on her back. But in reality, I had just armed the most devastating financial weapon of my life. I drove back to the suburban house I had shared with Harrison for 12 years. The drive gave me time to perfectly calibrate my emotions. I needed to be the submissive, confused wife one last time. When I pulled into the driveway, Harrison's leased sports car was already parked at an aggressive angle. He was home early. Beatrice had undoubtedly called him the second I left the Newport mansion, screaming about my threats and the fact that I knew about his 24-year-old mistress. I unlocked the front door and walked inside. The atmosphere in the house was incredibly thick, vibrating with a frantic, nervous energy. Harrison was standing in the kitchen, furiously pacing across the hardwood floor. He had a glass of scotch in one hand and a thick stack of legal documents in the other. His tie was loosened and his designer suit was wrinkled. The polished, arrogant wealth manager was gone, replaced by a cornered, sweating animal. "Clara," he said, his voice cracking slightly before he forced it down into a smooth, artificial baritone. "There you are. I was getting worried. Mom called me earlier. She said you stopped by the Newport house and had some kind of episode. She said you were rambling about owning the property and talking about my clients." I set my purse on the counter and looked at him with wide, innocent eyes. "She told you that? I was just there to check the security system, Harrison. You know how stressful my tech job has been lately. I think the lack of sleep is finally catching up to me. I might have been a little confused." Harrison let out a massive sigh of relief, instantly buying my performance. His massive ego simply could not process the idea that I had outsmarted him. He walked over and placed a heavy hand on my shoulder, giving me a patronizing smile. "I know," honey, Harrison murmured, playing the role of the benevolent provider. "You work so hard at that little IT job. You are just exhausted. That is why you are imagining things. But listen, we have a tiny situation that requires your immediate attention. It is a massive investment opportunity, but it requires some temporary liquidity on my end." I looked down at the stack of papers in his hand. "What kind of opportunity?" "You are so successful, Harrison. Do you really need my help? He chuckled, a nervous, desperate sound. Well, my firm is restructuring some offshore assets. It is a highly complex wealth management strategy. To finalize the transfers, I need to temporarily consolidate our joint accounts and leverage the equity on this house. It is just a standard spousal consent form. It gives me temporary power of attorney to manage the household assets while you rest and recover from your stress. It was exactly what Mitchell had predicted. Harrison was trying to trick me into signing a blanket power of attorney so he could legally drain my visible bank accounts and take out a massive loan against our suburban home. He wanted to steal every last dollar before I filed for divorce. I reached out and took the documents from his shaking hands. I flipped to the signature page. It was a broad, unrestricted power of attorney. If I signed it, he could legally sell the shoes off my feet. Wow, this looks very complicated, Harrison, I said, keeping my voice soft and compliant. But Mitchell, the attorney who handles my company contracts, always told me I need to include a standard tax liability addendum on any joint financial filing, just to protect us from an audit. He actually emailed me a blank copy today for my files. Let me just print it out so we can attach it. Harrison frowned, his panic spiking. Clara, we do not need to involve lawyers. This is urgent. The market closes soon. It will only take 1 second, I promised already, walking toward my home office. It is just a standard tech industry rider. I cannot sign without it. You know how anxious I get about taxes. I walked into my office, closed the door, and pulled a single sheet of paper from my desk drawer. It was not a tax rider. It was a highly specific legal affidavit Mitchell had drafted for me just 3 hours ago. Disguised under layers of dense corporate jargon and standard liability clauses was a direct admission of guilt. It explicitly stated that the signatory acknowledges the unauthorized transfer of $420,000 from joint accounts to offshore entities and assumes sole individual criminal liability for all associated wire fraud. I walked back into the kitchen and placed the affidavit on top of his power of attorney document. I handed him a pen. You just need to sign the bottom of the addendum first, acknowledging the tax liability transfer, I said sweetly. Then I will sign your power of attorney. Harrison was sweating profusely now. His phone buzzed on the counter, likely another panicked text from Beatrice or his mistress. He was completely blinded by desperation. He did not read the document. He did not even glance at the dense paragraphs detailing his offshore embezzlement. He just saw an obstacle standing between him and his escape fund. Fine, whatever keeps you happy, Clara, he snapped, his loving facade cracking under the immense pressure. He grabbed the pen, flipped to the last page of the affidavit, and scrawled his signature on the bottom line. He pushed the papers back toward me. There. Now sign the power of attorney so I can fix this. I picked up the signed affidavit, carefully separating it from his power of attorney document. I folded the affidavit twice and slipped it into the pocket of my blazer. Then I looked at the power of attorney document on the granite counter. I did not pick up the pen. Actually, Harrison, I think I changed my mind, I said, dropping the confused wife act entirely. My voice was suddenly cold, sharp, and totally steady. I do not think I will be signing over my assets to a man who steals from his wife to buy sports cars for a 24-year-old girl. Harrison froze. The blood drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse. What did you just say? I stepped closer to him, closing the distance between us. I did not have a mental breakdown today at the Newport house, Harrison. I told Beatrice the exact truth. I own that estate. I bought it in cash. And I know everything about Chloe. I know about the $85,000 wire transfer you forged using my retirement funds. I know about the $4,500 apartment lease. And I know about the Cayman Islands. Harrison stumbled backward, his back hitting the stainless steel refrigerator. He looked at the empty space on the counter, then at my pocket. What did I just sign, Clara? You just signed a legally binding confession to federal wire fraud and embezzlement, I whispered, savoring the absolute terror in his eyes. You thought you were tricking the naive help desk worker, but you just handed a loaded gun to the chief executive officer of Apex Holdings. Now pack your things and get out of my house. Harrison stared at me, his chest heaving as the reality of my words hung in the silence. For a fraction of a second, I saw genuine terror behind his eyes. But Harrison was a narcissist to his core. He could never accept defeat from a woman he considered his intellectual inferior. The panic slowly drained from his face, replaced by a cold, arrogant smirk. He reached for his glass, took a slow sip, and leaned against the island. "You really think you are a mastermind, Clara?" he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "You think slipping a piece of unnotarized paper into your pocket means anything in the real world? A judge would laugh you out of the courtroom. It was signed under duress without legal counsel present. It is legally worthless. And as for this house, my name is on the marital deed. I am not going anywhere." He set the glass down and grabbed his briefcase. He pulled out a laptop and slammed it onto the counter, flipping it open. "You want to talk about reality?" He continued, typing furiously into the keyboard. "Let us talk about reality. I knew you were acting strange this week. I knew you were locking me out of the primary accounts. So I made a contingency plan. I did not just come here to get a physical signature, Clara. That was just the appetizer. I came here to secure my investment portfolio, and you are going to help me do it." He spun the laptop around. It displayed a highly complex banking portal. At the center of the screen was a pending wire transfer for $1.2 million, routed from a domestic corporate account to an offshore holding company. I looked closer at the source account name. It was not one of my corporate accounts. It was registered to Jamal Hayes. "What did you do, Harrison?" I asked, allowing a hint of genuine alarm to enter my voice. "I offered Jamal the investment opportunity of a lifetime," Harrison said smoothly, adjusting his tie. "I told him I could double his seed money for his new tech startup by routing it through my premier offshore funds. He wired the capital to my escrow account this morning. But there is a catch. The escrow account is jointly tied to our marital assets. To release the funds to the Cayman entity, the bank requires a dual digital authorization, a digital power of attorney verified by your personal biometric security key." I stared at the screen, feigning horror. "You stole Jamal's money. You stole the money he needs to start his business right before his wedding to your sister." "I did not steal it," Harrison sneered. "I am relocating it. But if you do not plug your security key into this laptop right now and authorize the power of attorney, transfer the escrow account will automatically default by midnight. The funds will be frozen in litigation for years. Jamal will be completely bankrupt. Olivia's wedding will be ruined, and my mother will know exactly who caused it, you." He stepped closer, invading my personal space. His eyes were wild, fueled by scotch and desperation. "You are going to authorize this investment restructuring, Clara. You are going to sign the digital power of attorney. You will take the blame for the frozen accounts, and I will walk away with the liquidity I need. Or else I will burn my entire family to the ground and blame you for the ashes." I looked from his flushed face to the screen. This was his grand strategy, the investment trick. He thought he could use Jamal as collateral to force my hand, utilizing a digital power of attorney to completely bypass the physical trust protections I had set up with Mitchell. It was a vicious, highly illegal maneuver, and it was exactly the mistake I needed him to make. "You are a monster, Harrison," I whispered, playing the part of the cornered, defeated wife. "You would really destroy Jamal just to save yourself." "I am a survivor, Clara," he corrected sharply. "Now plug in your security token. Authorize the transfer." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my encrypted titanium USB drive. My hands trembled slightly, a carefully rehearsed physical reaction that made Harrison smile with dark satisfaction. I inserted the drive into the side of his laptop. A prompt appeared on the screen requesting my master password to execute the joint power of attorney. I placed my fingers on the keyboard, but I did not enter my standard banking password. Instead, I typed in a 32-character command sequence. Harrison watched impatiently. "Just authorize it, Clara. Stop stalling. I need to verify the routing nodes," I said quietly, my fingers flying across the keys with a speed he had never seen me use. "I'm not sending Jamal's money blindly. What I was actually doing was executing a legal loophole embedded deep within the banking software's architecture. Mitchell and I had anticipated a digital attack. We had coordinated with the Federal Fraud Department earlier that afternoon. I was not signing a power of attorney. I was executing a reverse authorization smart contract. By using my security token on Harrison's specific device, logged in under his administrative profile, I was hard-coding his laptop's IP address, MAC address, and his active session data directly into the federal banking registry. I hit the enter key. The screen flashed green, then instantly locked, displaying a massive red warning banner from the Securities and Exchange Commission. Harrison lunged forward, grabbing the laptop. "What did you do? The screen is frozen. Why does it say federal lockdown?" I pulled my security token out of the machine and slipped it back into my pocket. My trembling act vanished completely. I stood up straight, locking eyes with the man who had tried to destroy me. "You were right about one thing, Harrison," I said, my voice ringing with absolute authority. "That piece of paper you signed earlier was just the appetizer. The digital signature you just forced me to execute was the main course." Harrison frantically hit the escape key, but the machine was entirely bricked. "What did you authorize, Clara?" "I did not authorize a power of attorney," I explained coldly. "I authorized a federal audit protocol. By demanding I use my security token on your logged-in device, you just linked your personal digital footprint to the fraudulent Cayman accounts. You just initiated an irrevocable trace on Jamal's money, proving that you were the one attempting to move it offshore without his legal consent." Harrison backed away from the laptop as if it were a bomb about to detonate. "You cannot do that. That is impossible. I built the cybersecurity architecture for half the banks on Wall Street." "Harrison," I said, taking a slow step toward him, "I sold my company for $150 million. There is no digital loophole you can exploit that I cannot turn into a prison sentence. Your signature is now permanently logged in the Federal Wire Fraud Database. The SEC has your location, your device history, and your exact IP address." Harrison looked violently ill. He grabbed the edge of the granite counter, his knuckles turning white. He finally realized the terrifying scope of the woman he had married. "The investment trick failed," Harrison Worse whispered. "Jamal's money is securely routed back to his primary account. Your offshore funds are permanently frozen. You have absolutely nothing left. So I suggest you use whatever cash you have in your wallet to hire a very good defense attorney, because the FBI will be knocking on this door by tomorrow morning." I turned my back on him and walked out of the kitchen, leaving him drowning in the wreckage of his own arrogant ambition. I had one final event to attend. The rehearsal dinner was waiting, and I was going to deliver a speech the Blackwell family would never forget. I walked upstairs, leaving the shattered remnants of Harrison's ego behind me. The silence in the house felt like absolute victory. I entered the master suite and walked directly to my closet, pulling out my dress for the evening. It was a custom-designed emerald silk gown, sleek and uncompromising. It was not the dress of a submissive wife. It was the armor of an executioner. 10 minutes later, Harrison walked into the bedroom carrying his vintage leather weekender bag. His face was pale, a fine sheen of sweat coating his forehead, but his jaw was set in rigid defiance. His narcissistic mind had spent the last 10 minutes desperately constructing a fortress of denial. He simply could not accept that the quiet woman he had belittled for a decade had just dismantled his entire life. He threw the bag onto our king-sized bed and marched to his side of the closet. He began pulling designer suits and silk ties from the racks, aggressively throwing them into the leather hold-all. He was breathing heavily, his frantic movements fueled by expensive scotch and raw, unadulterated panic. "You really think you are so clever, Clara," he muttered from inside the closet. "You think you can run a little computer trick and actually scare me. I am a senior partner at a premier wealth management firm. My legal team deals with SEC compliance audits every single day. They will have that freeze lifted by Monday morning. They will squash your pathetic digital tantrum before the financial markets even open." I stood in front of the vanity mirror, calmly fastening a diamond clasp around my wrist. I did not even bother turning around to look at him. "If that makes you feel better, Harrison, you should absolutely keep repeating it to yourself." He stepped out of the closet, pointing a $1,000 Italian loafer at me like a weapon. "I am stating facts. You think you know how the real world works because you sold some code to a tech company. But you do not understand true power or leverage. You are just a bitter, jealous woman who finally realized she could never fit into my elite world. He dropped the shoes into his bag and zipped it shut with a violent yank. He walked over to his mahogany dresser, picked up his heavy gold money clip, and peeled off 5 crisp $100 bills. He walked toward me, a sneer twisting his handsome features into something ugly, and threw the money onto the vanity table. The bills scattered across the pristine glass. "There is $500, Clara," he said, his voice dripping with venomous condescension. "Order some takeout tonight. Buy yourself a nice bottle of cheap wine and sit on the couch. Because you are not coming to the rehearsal dinner. You are not coming to the wedding. I am cutting you out of the weekend entirely." My mother was right. You do not belong with high society. You are an embarrassment to my family, and I will not let you ruin Olivia's perfect weekend with your pathetic middle-class jealousy. I looked down at the money scattered on the table. $500. The amount was genuinely comical, the physical manifestation of his utter delusion. He was standing in a house he no longer owned, wearing clothes purchased with stolen money, facing immediate federal prison time, and he still truly believed he could buy my submissive silence for the price of a fancy dinner. I picked up the bills, straightening the edges perfectly, and slipped them into my evening clutch purse. "Thank you, Harrison," I said smoothly, my tone entirely devoid of anger. "I appreciate the generous gesture. I suppose I will just stay home and order that takeout." Harrison smirked, his fragile ego instantly inflated by my apparent surrender. "Good. I am glad you finally understand your place in this dynamic. I will deal with your little SEC stunt on Monday. Until then, stay out of my way." He grabbed his bag, marched out of the room, and slammed the heavy door behind him. I listened to his footsteps descend the stairs, followed by the front door closing. A moment later, the aggressive roar of his leased sports car echoed through the driveway as he sped off. He was driving to the rehearsal dinner, firmly believing he had successfully banished me to the shadows. He had absolutely no idea what was waiting for him. I walked over to the closet and retrieved my emerald silk gown. I slipped it on the luxurious fabric, wrapping around me like a second skin. I applied a striking shade of dark red lipstick, my reflection staring back at me with absolute terrifying clarity. I did not look like a compliant invisible wife. I looked exactly like the chief executive officer of a $150 million empire. Harrison had told me I did not belong with high society. But true power does not ask for an invitation, and it certainly does not care about the opinions of a bankrupt fraudster. I grabbed my clutch, ensuring Harrison's $500 was safely tucked inside. I fully intended to give it back to him before the night was over. He was going to need every single cent to pay for his cab ride home after I publicly dismantled his life. I walked out of the bedroom and gracefully descended the grand staircase. I locked the front door behind me and bypassed my practical daily driver, walking over to the sleek matte black sports coupe I kept parked in the third garage bay. It was a vehicle Harrison had never been allowed to touch. I slid into the driver's seat, the engine roaring to life with a deep growl. The rehearsal dinner was being held at an exclusive rooftop restaurant downtown, a venue Beatrice had selected to project maximum status. It was the perfect stage. I pulled out of the driveway and merged onto the highway, the city lights reflecting off the dark hood of my car. Harrison thought he had left me behind with $500 and a strict command to remain invisible. He thought his darkest secrets were safe behind the polished facade of his fake aristocratic lifestyle. But the facade was already crumbling. All that was left was the final push, and I was exactly the woman to deliver it. I pressed my foot down on the accelerator, speeding toward the glittering city skyline. The time for hiding was officially over. High society was about to receive a terrifying masterclass in real power, and the Blackwell family would be the primary subject. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and crimson as I navigated the matte black coupe through the heavy downtown traffic. The engine purred with a restrained, dangerous energy that perfectly matched my own. I was 10 minutes away from the exclusive rooftop restaurant. My phone synced directly to the dashboard console, suddenly illuminated the dark cabin. The caller ID displayed Jamal Hayes. I tapped the steering wheel to accept the call. The crisp audio system of the luxury vehicle instantly picked up the chaotic background noise of clinking glasses and overlapping conversations from the rehearsal venue. Clara Jamal said, his voice tight and unnaturally hushed. "Thank God you picked up. Are you all right?" "I am perfectly fine, Jamal," I answered smoothly, keeping my eyes on the taillights ahead of me. "Why do you ask?" "Because Harrison just arrived with Beatrice and Olivia, and he told my mother you were completely incapacitated with a severe migraine," Jamal explained. "He said you had a massive panic attack at the Newport house this afternoon and had to be heavily medicated. He made a huge production out of apologizing for your absence. But his story does not make any sense. I saw you just a few hours ago and you were the calmest person in the room." "Harrison has a very active imagination," I replied, a cool smile touching my lips. "But I assure you I have never been more alert or focused in my entire life. I am currently driving downtown." Jamal let out a sharp sigh of relief, though the tension in his voice did not entirely dissipate. "Listen, Clara, I need your advice. Something is incredibly wrong here tonight. The entire energy is toxic." Olivia is pacing near the elevators looking like she is about to faint. Beatrice is aggressively drinking champagne and snapping at the waitstaff, and Harrison looks like a cornered animal. But that is not even the worst part. "Tell me," I commanded gently. "Harrison just pulled me into a private alcove near the coat check," Jamal said, his voice dropping to an anxious whisper. "He brought a leather folder with him. He claims it is an expedited wealth integration contract for the wedding. He said his legal team needs both my signature and Olivia's signature tonight to finalize the trust accounts before the ceremony tomorrow. He is pushing me incredibly hard to sign it right now before the appetizers are even served. He said if I do not sign it, the offshore seed money for my tech startup will be permanently locked in a holding pattern due to market volatility." My grip on the steering wheel tightened. Harrison was truly a creature of pure, desperate instinct. The digital lock I had placed on his laptop had frozen his offshore access, but he was still trying to maneuver. If he could get Jamal's physical signature on a joint wealth integration contract with Olivia, he could potentially legally bind Jamal's remaining liquid assets to the Blackwell family before the fraud was completely exposed. He was trying to drag Jamal onto a sinking ship to use him as a financial life raft. "Where is the document right now?" I asked, my tone sharpening into a blade. "I told him I needed to read it over," Jamal said. "I left it in the alcove." Clara, he was sweating, literally sweating through his designer suit. He told me it was just a formality, but he looked completely frantic. I read the first page, and it explicitly grants Harrison's firm the power to leverage my personal real estate portfolio as collateral for Olivia's marital trust. It feels like a massive trap. "You are a very smart man, Jamal," I said, accelerating aggressively past a slow-moving sedan. "Your instincts are entirely correct. It is not just a trap, it is a financial guillotine. Harrison is entirely bankrupt." The line went dead silent for 3 long seconds. "Bankrupt," Jamal finally repeated the word, sounding foreign on his tongue. "What do you mean bankrupt? He manages millions. He bought that $9 million Newport estate in cash." "Harrison did not buy that estate, Jamal," I stated clearly. "I bought it. I own every single asset the Blackwell family claims to possess." For the past 3 years, Harrison has been systematically embezzling my corporate funds to maintain a fake aristocratic lifestyle and fund a 24-year-old mistress. As of this afternoon, I have legally severed my entire empire from his grasp. I froze his accounts. I locked his credit cards. He does not have a single dime to his name, and he is currently under active investigation by the Federal Fraud Department. I could hear Jamal's sharp intake of breath over the speakers. The pieces were rapidly falling into place in his highly analytical mind. The fake tea party, Beatrice's desperate behavior, Olivia's anxiety, and Harrison's manic push for a signature. "My God," Jamal whispered. "He is trying to steal my assets to cover his own embezzlement." "Exactly," I confirmed. "He knows his time is up. He is trying to legally entangle your wealth with Olivia's before you find out the truth. Once your name is on that document, your startup capital and your real estate will be seized by the FBI to pay back the money he stole. He is trying to destroy your future to buy himself a few more days of freedom. Anger, cold and precise, radiated through the phone. I am leaving, Jamal said firmly. I am walking out of this venue right now, and I am taking my mother and my aunts with me. I will not let that parasite near my family. No, I said sharply. Do not leave. Clara, I am not sitting at a table with these people, Jamal shot back. You will not have to sit with them for long, I promised, pulling into the private valet lane of the rooftop restaurant. The towering glass building loomed above me, glowing brilliantly against the night sky. Listen to me very carefully, Jamal. You must not sign a single piece of paper. Do not even sign a cocktail napkin. Keep your hands entirely in your pockets, but you need to stay exactly where you are. Why? Jamal asked, his voice tight. Because Harrison has spent a decade tearing down other people to build his own false pedestal, I said, shifting the coupe into park. Because Beatrice has treated everyone around her like garbage because she believed she held the financial high ground. Because Olivia is completely complicit in a scheme to drain your bank accounts. They thrive in the shadows, Jamal. They survive by manipulating the narrative behind closed doors. If you just walk away quietly, they will spin a story making you the villain. I turned off the ignition. The engine fell silent. They need to be exposed in the light, I continued. In front of your family. In front of the high society peers they are trying to impress. They need to be publicly dismantled, so they can never do this to anyone else ever again. I understand, Jamal said, his tone shifting from anxious to resolute. What do you need me to do? Go back into the main dining room, I instructed. Tell Harrison you are ready to discuss the contract. Gather him, Beatrice and Olivia, around the main table where your mother is sitting. Get them all in one place. Make them believe they have won. Make Harrison feel perfectly secure. And then what? Jamal asked. And then I said, opening my car door, you wait for the guest of honor to arrive. I ended the call. I stepped out of the vehicle and handed the keys to the stunned valet, who stared wide-eyed at the sleek car and my emerald gown. I did not give him a second glance. I walked through the revolving glass doors and stepped into the private elevator. I pressed the button for the penthouse floor. The heavy steel doors slid shut, sealing me inside. The ascent was incredibly smooth, but my pulse was a steady, rhythmic drumbeat of anticipation. The warning had been delivered. The trap was set. Now it was time to drop the hammer. The heavy steel doors of the penthouse elevator slid open with a soft chime. I stepped out of the confined space and into the expansive, glittering foyer of the rooftop restaurant. The venue was a masterpiece of modern architecture featuring floor-to-ceiling glass walls that offered a breathtaking panoramic view of the sprawling city skyline. Crystal chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceiling like frozen rain, casting a warm, expensive glow over the gathered elite. Waitstaff in crisp white jackets moved seamlessly through the dense crowd, carrying silver trays of imported champagne and delicate hors d'oeuvres. It was the absolute pinnacle of high society. It was a fabricated kingdom built entirely on the back of my stolen wealth, and I was here to burn it to the ground. I paused at the entrance of the main dining room, allowing the ambient noise of clinking glasses, classical string music, and polite laughter to wash over me. I took a slow, deliberate breath, centering my focus. For 12 long years, I had purposefully made myself invisible in these opulent rooms. I had worn modest, unassuming clothes, kept my head down, and allowed Harrison to shine as the brilliant financial prodigy. I had played the role of the dowdy, socially awkward IT worker because I genuinely loved him and wanted him to feel absolutely secure in his fragile masculinity. But that compliant, invisible woman was completely dead. I stepped fully into the brilliant light of the dining room. The custom emerald silk gown draped flawlessly over my figure, a bold and uncompromising statement of absolute power. The fabric shifted like liquid glass with every step I took. I had paired the dress with a vintage diamond necklace that cost significantly more than Harrison's entire fake investment portfolio. My hair was styled in a sleek, commanding sweep, and my dark red lipstick felt like battle armor. I did not look like a submissive wife. I looked like a conquering executive. The effect on the room was immediate and spectacular. As I walked past the first cluster of wealthy guests, their conversation abruptly halted. Heads turned in unison. Eyes widened in genuine shock. The wealthy socialites and arrogant financiers who had previously ignored my existence now stared in stunned silence. The ripple effect moved rapidly across the massive room, a wave of palpable shock preceding my every step. The classical music seemed to fade into the background. I was no longer the invisible shadow trailing behind Harrison Blackwell. I was the absolute center of gravity in the room. I scanned the sea of faces and easily located the central VIP table. It was positioned directly against the expansive glass wall offering the most prestigious view in the entire restaurant. Jamal was sitting rigidly in his chair, his hands neatly folded in his lap, exactly as I had instructed over the phone. Next to him sat his mother, Dr. Evelyn Hayes, looking regal sharp and highly observant. On the opposite side of the table sat the primary architects of my misery. Beatrice was wearing a heavily beaded silver dress, aggressively holding court and projecting forced confidence. Olivia sat next to her, nervously twisting her massive diamond engagement ring. And standing at the head of the table, leaning over Jamal with a frantic, predatory intensity, was Harrison. He was holding a silver pen in his right hand and pointing urgently to the heavy leather contract folder resting on the pristine white linen tablecloth. I walked directly toward them, my heels clicking sharply against the polished hardwood floor. The rhythmic sound cut through the rapidly diminishing chatter of the room, like a metronome counting down to an inevitable explosion. Olivia was the very first person to see me approaching. She froze mid-sentence, her mouth slightly open. Her eyes darted frantically from my face to the striking emerald gown, completely unable to process the visual information computing in her brain. She nudged her mother violently under the table. Beatrice turned her head, an annoyed expression instantly melting into pure, unadulterated horror. She gasped audibly, her hand flying to her throat, as if she were suddenly choking on the expensive air. The glass of champagne in her other hand tilted dangerously, spilling expensive liquid onto the tablecloth. Harrison, sensing the sudden drastic shift in the atmosphere, finally turned around. The silver pen slipped from his sweating fingers and clattered loudly onto the table. His jaw physically dropped. For a long, agonizing moment, he just stared at me, completely paralyzed by the sheer impossibility of my presence. The woman he had ordered to stay home and order cheap takeout was now commanding the entire room, radiating a terrifying level of wealth and authority he could not even begin to comprehend. He blinked rapidly, his narcissistic brain scrambling desperately to regain control of the collapsing narrative. He forced a stiff, incredibly unnatural smile onto his face, and quickly stepped away from the table, moving swiftly to intercept me before I could reach Jamal and Dr. Hayes. Clara, Harrison said, his voice a frantic, breathy whisper as he closed the distance between us. "What in the world are you doing here? I explicitly told you to stay home and rest. You are having a severe medical episode. You need to leave right now before you embarrass the entire family in front of these important people." He reached out to grab my arm, fully intending to forcefully escort me back to the elevator and shove me out of sight. I did not flinch. I did not step back. Instead, I leveled a look of such absolute freezing contempt at him that his hand stopped dead, just inches from my skin. "Do not ever attempt to touch me again, Harrison," I said. My voice was not a whisper. It was a clear, ringing command that carried effortlessly over the silent room. The surrounding tables fell completely dead silent. Guests turned their chairs physically to watch the confrontation unfold. Harrison swallowed hard, a large bead of cold sweat tracing down the side of his pale face. "Clara, please," he pleaded softly, his eyes darting around nervously at the watching crowd. "People are staring at us. Just walk away and we can handle this quietly at home like adults." "We do not have a home, Harrison," I replied smoothly, stepping perfectly around him to approach the main table. I walked up to the empty chair directly across from Jamal. I rested my hands on the high back of the velvet chair and looked down at Beatrice and Olivia. Both women looked as though they were about to face a firing squad. "Good evening, Beatrice," I said, offering a cold, shark-like smile. "You look incredibly tense for a woman hosting such a lavish rehearsal dinner." "And Olivia, congratulations on your impending wedding. I sincerely hope you are prepared for the harsh financial realities of marriage." I turned my attention to Jamal and his mother. Dr. Hayes was watching me with intense, calculating fascination. She recognized a power play when she saw one. Jamal stood up immediately, offering a highly respectful nod. "Clara," Jamal said, his voice loud, steady, and projecting perfectly to the silent room, "I am very glad you decided to join us tonight. Harrison was just explaining this wealth integration contract to me. He says it is absolutely vital for the wedding to proceed." I looked down at the leather folder resting on the table. The final trap Harrison had laid was right there in plain sight. "Is that so?" I asked, pulling out my chair and sitting down with deliberate grace. "Well, Harrison has always been very creative with his financial advice. But before anyone signs a single binding document tonight, I think it is time we discuss the actual verified source of the Blackwell family wealth. I believe Jamal and Dr. Hayes deserve full transparency regarding the investments they are marrying into." Harrison lunged back toward the table, his face flushed a dark, dangerous red. "Do not listen to her, Jamal," he shouted, dropping the polite high society facade entirely. "She is having a psychotic break. She does not know what she is talking about." I calmly reached into my designer clutch, retrieving the 5 crisp $100 bills Harrison had thrown at me earlier in our bedroom. I tossed them onto the center of the table. They landed perfectly on top of his fraudulent contract. "You left this on the vanity table, Harrison," I said, my voice dripping with absolute authority. "You told me to order takeout, but I decided I prefer to dine with high society. Now sit down and be quiet. The adults are talking." The $500 sat on the crisp white linen, a blatant symbol of Harrison's delusional arrogance, resting directly on top of his fraudulent contract. The entire VIP table stared at the money as if it were a live grenade. The heavy silence in the room stretched to its absolute limit before shattering violently. Olivia slammed her hands flat onto the table, her massive diamond ring catching the chandelier light. "You psychotic bitch!" she screamed, completely abandoning any remaining pretense of high society elegance. "Get out of my rehearsal dinner right now. You are ruining my entire weekend." Harrison lunged forward. His face was contorted with a mixture of pure rage and absolute panic. He reached aggressively for my arm, fully intending to drag me out of the velvet chair and physically remove me from the restaurant. Security! Harrison bellowed, his voice echoing off the glass walls. "I need security at the main table immediately. We have a trespasser harassing my family." 2 large men in dark suits immediately detached themselves from the shadows near the elevator bank and began moving swiftly across the dining room. I did not move a single muscle. I did not break eye contact with Dr. Evelyn Hayes, who was watching the entire chaotic spectacle with cold, analytical detachment. Before Harrison's sweating hand could clamp down on my silk sleeve, Jamal stood up. He moved with a sudden, commanding physical presence that instantly halted Harrison in his tracks. "Do not touch her, Harrison," Jamal said. His voice was low, but it carried a terrifying edge of warning. "Jamal, this woman is mentally unstable." Harrison pleaded, desperately trying to salvage his crumbling authority. "She is having a severe medical breakdown. I am just trying to protect you and my sister from her delusions." The 2 security guards arrived at the table, looking uncertainly between Harrison and Jamal. "Sir, is there a problem here?" the taller guard asked, directing the question to Harrison. "Yes," Harrison barked. "Remove this woman from the premises immediately. She is not on the guest list." Jamal raised his hand, halting the guards with a single gesture. "I am the one paying for this venue tonight," Jamal stated clearly, "and this woman is my guest. If anyone lays a hand on her, the entire Blackwell family will be leaving instead. Stand down." The guards nodded respectfully and retreated a few steps, creating a perimeter around the table rather than removing me. Harrison looked as though he had been physically struck. He staggered back slightly, his mouth opening and closing without producing any sound. Olivia burst into theatrical tears, burying her heavily contoured face in her hands. "Mom, do something," she wailed, leaning heavily against Beatrice. "She is destroying my wedding." Beatrice rallied her fading strength. She puffed out her chest, trying to channel the aristocratic matriarch persona she had practiced in front of mirrors for a decade. "Clara, you have made your point," Beatrice hissed, her heavily beaded silver dress rustling as she leaned across the table. "You are angry. We understand. But this is a family matter. We can discuss your little grievances tomorrow. Do not do this to Olivia. Have some basic human decency and walk away." I slowly turned my head to look at my mother-in-law. "Basic human decency," I repeated, ensuring every single syllable was perfectly enunciated. That is a fascinating concept coming from a woman who spent the last 12 years treating me like an unpaid servant while living in a $9 million mansion funded entirely by my bank accounts. Beatrice physically recoiled. Dr. Hayes leaned forward, her sharp eyes locking onto mine. "Your bank accounts?" Dr. Hayes asked, her voice cutting through the noise with surgical precision. "Mom, do not listen to her." Harrison shouted, desperation clawing at his throat. He tried to snatch the leather contract folder off the table, but Jamal slammed his hand down firmly on top of it, trapping the documents in place. "I am listening to Clara right now," Harrison Jamal said coldly, "and I strongly suggest you remain completely silent." I turned my full attention to Dr. Hayes. She was a brilliant woman, a highly successful surgeon who had built generational wealth through discipline and intelligence. She recognized a fraud when the cracks began to show. "Dr. Hayes," I said calmly, ignoring the frantic hyperventilating coming from Olivia. "I apologize for interrupting this elegant evening, but I have spent the last 3 years watching this family construct a massive, glittering lie. I stayed quiet because I foolishly believed my husband actually loved me. I believed he was simply ambitious, but ambition is building your own empire. Harrison decided it was much easier to steal mine." Harrison let out a strangled, pathetic noise, but Jamal glared him into silence. "That contract sitting under your son's hand is not a wealth integration plan." I continued, my voice steady and completely devoid of emotion. "It is a desperate, highly illegal attempt to use Jamal's liquid assets as collateral to cover massive federal wire fraud. Harrison does not manage a premier private wealth portfolio. He manages a series of offshore shell companies designed to hide the money he embezzled from my corporate accounts." Olivia stopped crying instantly. She stared at me, her face completely blank with shock. "You are lying," Beatrice whispered, though her voice shook violently. "You are just a help desk worker. You do not have corporate accounts." I smiled at Beatrice. "I am the founder and former chief executive officer of a cybersecurity firm that I sold 18 months ago for $150 million, I stated clearly. I own the Newport estate. And as of 4 o'clock this afternoon, I have completely frozen every single asset they mistakenly believed they controlled." "He was going to pay his debts by stealing your son's startup capital," I clarified for Dr. Hayes. The great clash was finally over. I had delivered the fatal blow. The Blackwells were completely exposed. Checkmate. The silence that followed my declaration was absolute. Dr. Evelyn Hayes did not gasp. She simply steepled her fingers, her gaze shifting from my face to Harrison. The confident wealth manager who had charmed his way into her elite circle was completely gone. In his place stood a sweating fraud, his designer suit suddenly looking like a cheap costume. Harrison opened his mouth to speak, a desperate lie forming, but Jamal raised a single finger demanding silence. Dr. Hayes leaned forward, her voice dangerously calm. She asked me to explain the exact mechanics of the embezzlement to the entire table. I turned my body slightly, ensuring the surrounding tables of wealthy guests could hear every single syllable. "For 36 months, Harrison has been systematically siphoning funds from my personal business accounts," I explained clearly. "He created a fake corporate identity called Horizon Ventures. He told his family he was a senior partner at a premier wealth management firm. The truth is, Harrison has not been legally employed for 2 years. He was fired from his entry-level analyst position for gross incompetence. He spends his days sitting in a leased office space playing video games, moving my money offshore. Harrison let out a pathetic, wounded sound. He gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned completely white. That is a lie, he choked out, his eyes darting frantically around the room, begging anyone to believe him. Mom, you know how hard I work. You have seen my client portfolios. I am handling millions of dollars for the most elite clients in the city. You are handling absolutely nothing, Harrison, I countered sharply. You printed out fake quarterly statements using a generic software template. You funded this entire rehearsal dinner using a canceled credit card today. When the restaurant runs this tab tonight, it is going to decline. You are completely bankrupt. Beatrice let out a high-pitched wail. She grabbed Olivia's arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into her daughter's skin. But the house? Beatrice stammered, her heavily powdered face turning a sickly shade of gray. The Newport estate. Harrison bought it for us. The deed is registered to a corporate trust. He showed me the paperwork himself. We are established property owners. I looked down at my mother-in-law with a mixture of pity and absolute disgust. He showed you paperwork for a company called Apex Holdings, Beatrice. I own Apex Holdings. It is one of my real estate subsidiaries. I purchased that $9 million property in cash 6 months ago as a corporate investment. Harrison simply forged a set of keys and moved you in. You are not high society royalty, Beatrice. You are an unauthorized squatter living in a house you could never afford in 10 lifetimes. And as of tomorrow morning, my legal team is initiating formal eviction proceedings. You have exactly 24 hours to pack your designer bags and vacate my property. The surrounding guests actually gasped. The social destruction of Beatrice Blackwell was happening live, and high society feeds on absolute scandal. Beatrice physically slumped into her chair, the fabricated foundation of her entire life crumbling into dust. Olivia sprang to her feet, her chair violently scraping against the hardwood floor. "You are a jealous monster," Olivia screamed, tears streaming down her face, ruining her expensive makeup. "You are just making all of this up because Harrison does not want you anymore. He is leaving you because you are a cold, miserable woman who only cares about computers. He deserves to be happy." I laughed sharply. It was a genuine sound that echoed across the dining room. "Oh, Olivia, your brother is definitely seeking happiness elsewhere. But it is not because I am a miserable woman. It is because a 24-year-old girl is significantly easier to impress with stolen money." Harrison froze completely. His eyes widened to an impossible size. Beatrice, who had been staring blankly at the table, suddenly snapped her head up. "Let us talk about Chloe," I said, watching the blood completely drain from Harrison's face. "Let us talk about the gorgeous young woman who works at the luxury car dealership downtown." Harrison used $85,000 of my retirement funds to purchase a red Porsche for her last month. He also used my corporate account to lease her a $4,500 a month apartment in the financial district. I reached into my designer clutch and pulled out a small stack of glossy photographs. I had my private investigator snap them 3 days ago. I tossed them onto the table directly next to Harrison's $500. The photos clearly showed Harrison and Chloe walking out of an upscale jewelry store, kissing passionately next to the red Porsche. Beatrice stared at the photographs, her mouth hanging open. "You knew about her," I said, leaning directly toward my mother-in-law. "You went shopping with her last Tuesday. You conspired to replace me while spending the money I was quietly earning. You sold your soul for a few designer handbags, Beatrice. And now you are left with absolutely nothing." Jamal looked at the photographs, then looked at the forged wealth integration contract still resting under his hand. He slowly pulled his hand away, as if the leather folder was covered in poison. He looked at Olivia, who was sobbing uncontrollably, and then at Harrison, who looked like he was about to vomit. "You tried to bind my startup capital to your fraudulent debts," Jamal whispered, the terrifying realization washing over him. "You tried to use my life to save yours." Dr. Evelyn Hayes stood up, her movements precise and terrifying. She draped her silk shawl over her shoulders. "The wedding is canceled," Dr. Hayes announced, her voice commanding absolute obedience. Jamal, gather your aunts. We are leaving immediately. Jamal offered me a respectful nod. Thank you, Clara. He turned and walked away. The grand game was over. As Jamal and Dr. Hayes walked out of the rooftop restaurant, taking their generational wealth and Olivia's entire future with them, the silence in the dining room finally broke. A low, furious buzzing sound erupted as dozens of wealthy guests leaned across their tables, whispering frantically. The scandal of the decade had just unfolded over appetizers, and they were feasting on every single detail. Beatrice, realizing that her golden ticket to high society had just walked into the elevator, suddenly snapped. The paralyzing shock morphed into violent, unhinged hysteria. She pointed a shaking finger at me, her face flushed with terrifying rage. "Someone call the police right now!" Beatrice screamed at the top of her lungs, spittle flying from her lips. "I want this woman arrested. She is trespassing at a private event. She is harassing my family and spreading vicious defamatory lies. Call the authorities. I want her in handcuffs immediately." As if summoned by her frantic demands, the heavy steel doors of the penthouse elevator slid open again. But it was not restaurant security stepping out. It was a uniformed county sheriff accompanied by a senior deputy. Their heavy utility belts and gleaming badges cut a sharp contrast against the glittering crystal chandeliers. Beatrice spotted them instantly. Her eyes lit up with malicious triumph. Finally, she gasped, rushing toward the officers. "Officer, thank God you are here. Arrest that woman in the green dress. She crashed our private rehearsal dinner. She is completely unhinged and threatening my son. I want to press full criminal charges for trespassing." The sheriff smoothly sidestepped Beatrice's frantic, grasping hands. He did not look at me. Instead, he pulled a thick manila folder from his leather clipboard. "Are you Beatrice Blackwell?" The sheriff asked, his voice a deep, authoritative rumble that carried across the hushed dining room. "Yes, I am," Beatrice declared proudly, adjusting her beaded silver dress. "And I demand you remove Clara Blackwell from this premises." The sheriff opened the folder and pulled out a stack of legally stamped documents. "I am not here for her, ma'am. I am here for you and Olivia Blackwell. You are being officially served." He thrust the documents directly into Beatrice's hands. She took them reflexively, blinking in total confusion. Served with what she stammered. "An emergency order of eviction," the sheriff stated loudly, ensuring every single guest heard him. "Issued by the county judge an hour ago on behalf of Apex Holdings. You and your daughter have been occupying the Newport Coastal Estate without a legal lease, utilizing fraudulent access provided by Harrison Blackwell. The property owner has formally categorized you as hostile squatters." Beatrice stared at the papers as if they were covered in venom. "An eviction," she whispered the word, sounding completely alien to her. "You cannot evict us. We live there. My son bought that house." "Your son does not own the property, ma'am," the sheriff corrected sharply. "And because there is documented evidence of wire fraud and unauthorized entry tied to your residency, standard eviction timelines have been waived by the judge. You have exactly 24 hours to remove all personal belongings from the premises. If you are found on the property after 6 o'clock tomorrow evening, you will both be arrested for criminal trespassing. Have a good night." The sheriff pivoted sharply and walked back toward the elevator bank, leaving Beatrice staring at the eviction notice as if it were a death warrant. But as the heavy steel doors slid open for the sheriff to depart, Jamal stepped back into the dining room. He had not gone down to the lobby with his mother. He had stood quietly in the marble foyer, watching the final undeniable proof of the Blackwell family's complete insolvency unfold before his eyes. Olivia let out a desperate, strangled gasp when she saw him. She shoved past her paralyzed mother and ran toward him. "Jamal, please," she sobbed loudly, reaching out with both hands to grab his tailored suit jacket. "You cannot leave me like this. This is all a massive misunderstanding. Harrison made a mistake, but I had absolutely nothing to do with it. I love you. We are getting married on Saturday. We can fix this." Jamal did not embrace her. He did not offer a single ounce of comfort. He looked down at her hands, gripping his jacket, his expression completely devoid of the warmth he had shown her just an hour ago. He reached up and slowly, deliberately peeled her shaking fingers off his lapel. "Do not ever touch me again," Jamal said. His voice was perfectly level, carrying an icy finality that instantly silenced Olivia's frantic pleading. "You knew exactly who funded your luxurious lifestyle, Olivia. You sat next to Clara at every family event wearing designer clothes bought with her stolen money while treating her like a servant. You are not an innocent victim. You are a willing accomplice to a criminal fraud." Olivia stumbled backward, clutching her chest as if she had been physically struck. The surrounding guests watched with wide eyes, completely captivated by the brutal social execution. "The engagement is permanently cancelled," Jamal announced, projecting his voice so every single remaining guest could hear the final verdict. "Now take off the ring." Olivia shook her head violently, clutching her left hand against her stomach. "No, you gave this to me. It is mine. Take it off right now, Olivia, or I will have my security forcibly remove it from your finger." Jamal ordered, his eyes flashing with sudden anger. "I am absolutely not letting you pawn a $200,000 family heirloom to pay for your brother's imminent legal fees." Trembling uncontrollably, Olivia slid the massive diamond off her finger and dropped it into his outstretched hand. Jamal did not put the ring in his pocket. Instead, he walked directly past her and approached the main table. He tossed the heavy diamond onto the crisp white linen. It landed perfectly beside Harrison's fraudulent contract and the 5 crisp $100 bills. Jamal then turned to face me. "Clara, I sincerely apologize for my family almost becoming entangled in this pathetic scam," he said respectfully. "You played a brilliant game tonight. You have my utmost respect." With that, Jamal turned around and walked out of the restaurant forever, leaving the Blackwell family entirely in ruins. The absolute devastation of the Blackwell family did not end in that glittering rooftop restaurant. The very next morning, the crushing reality of my meticulously planned checkmate fully materialized. At precisely 8 o'clock, 3 black government vehicles pulled up to the leased office space Harrison falsely claimed was a premier wealth management firm. 6 armed federal agents raided the building, seizing every computer hard drive and forged document they could find. Harrison was escorted out in heavy steel handcuffs, his expensive tailored suit completely rumpled from spending a sleepless night in his car. The federal prosecutor did not offer him a polite plea deal or a gentle slap on the wrist. They hit him with 42 counts of aggravated wire fraud, grand larceny, and corporate embezzlement. Because I had painstakingly documented every single illegal transfer over a 3-year period, the paper trail was absolutely flawless. The judge denied him bail, citing him as an extreme flight risk given his proven access to offshore shell accounts. Harrison was immediately transferred to a federal detention center, trading his luxury lifestyle for a standard-issue orange jumpsuit. While Harrison was being processed into the federal penal system, Beatrice and Olivia faced their own brutal awakening. The eviction notice served at the rehearsal dinner was strictly enforced. At 6 o'clock that evening, my private security team, accompanied by local law enforcement, escorted them off the Newport estate. They were allowed to take only their personal clothing and basic necessities. Everything else, the designer furniture, the expensive artwork, the imported cars, belonged entirely to my corporate trust. Their sudden descent from high society was vicious and permanent. With Harrison's accounts frozen and Jamal's immense wealth entirely gone, they were completely destitute. They were forced to rent a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in a rundown complex situated right next to a noisy interstate highway. It was a staggering downgrade from a $9 million mansion, but the housing situation was only a fraction of their nightmare. Because Harrison had funded the massive wedding deposits using stolen credit cards that were now canceled, the furious vendors aggressively turned their attention to the bride's family. Beatrice and Olivia were personally hit with over $300,000 in unrefundable wedding debt. Every caterer, floral designer, and venue coordinator sued them for breach of contract. Olivia was forced to take a minimum wage job working the front desk of a budget gym just to help her mother pay the compounding legal fees. She spent her days handing out towels to strangers, constantly hiding her bare left hand inside her pocket. Beatrice spent her evenings weeping over old luxury magazines. The arrogant women who had spent years mocking my modest clothing were now relying on food banks and wearing faded sweatpants entirely erased from the elite social circles they had sacrificed their own humanity to infiltrate. The Blackwell family had tried to steal an empire, but they were ultimately buried under the massive, suffocating weight of their greed. The cool ocean breeze swept off the Atlantic, carrying the clean scent of salt water. I stood on the expansive master balcony of the Newport estate, resting my hands against the smooth marble balustrade. Below me, the manicured lawns rolled down to the private beach, bathed in the soft glow of a full moon. The crashing waves provided a rhythmic soundtrack that washed away the lingering noise of the past 3 years. This $9 million masterpiece was no longer a staging ground for a fabricated dynasty. It was a fortress of absolute solitude. It was finally truly mine. I raised the crystal goblet, savoring the complex notes of a vintage Bordeaux. It was the same bottle Harrison ordered for a dinner with his mistress 2 months ago, entirely oblivious that my security team was tracking every transaction. Now he was drinking lukewarm water from a plastic cup in a federal holding facility, while I was tasting the sweet flavor of total victory. The contrast was not just satisfying, it was utterly intoxicating. I turned away from the ocean and looked back into the master suite. The massive space had been completely purged of every trace of the Blackwell family. The cheap decorative pillows Beatrice scattered across the velvet sofas were gone. The unread books Harrison purchased to look intellectual were sitting in a local landfill. My design team had spent the last 48 hours restoring the house to its breathtaking minimalist elegance. The room was now a reflection of my own mind, uncluttered, sharp, and brilliantly illuminated. My cell phone buzzed softly on the glass patio table, disrupting the quiet night. I picked it up and glanced at the caller ID. It was Marcus, my lead corporate attorney. I answered the call, my voice steady and relaxed. "Good evening, Marcus," I said, leaning back against the marble balustrade. "Good evening," Clara, Marcus replied, his tone laced with satisfaction. "I am calling to provide the final update on the Blackwell situation. The federal judge formally denied Harrison's appeal for bail this afternoon. The prosecution secured a rock-solid indictment on all 42 counts of wire fraud and embezzlement. Given the volume of the stolen funds, his public defender is advising him to prepare for a mandatory sentence of 15 years in a maximum security federal penitentiary." "And the civil suits regarding the wedding debt?" I asked, taking another slow sip of my wine. Moving forward aggressively, Marcus confirmed. Beatrice and Olivia failed to appear for their arbitration hearing this morning. The vendors have officially secured default judgments against them. Their wages will be garnished indefinitely. They are completely financially paralyzed. They will never recover from this. "Thank you, Marcus," I said softly. "You executed the strategy perfectly. Enjoy your weekend." I ended the call and set the phone face down. The grand game was officially over. There were no more moves to be made. The king was captured, the queen was dethroned, and the pawns swept off the board. I had systematically dismantled their entire reality and rebuilt my empire on the ashes of their unprecedented greed. For 12 long years, I allowed a mediocre man to convince me that my brilliance was a liability. I dimmed my light, hid my financial success, and played the invisible wife simply because I wanted to be loved. I willingly handed over the keys to my kingdom to a fraud who viewed my loyalty as weakness. I allowed Beatrice to mock my modest clothing. I allowed Olivia to roll her eyes at my career. I had funded the very people who secretly despised me.